Looking to create a resume that stands out to localization hiring managers? In this video, learn what they look for in a candidate's resume.
I look for a lot of clarity in a resume. Translators have to be good writers. So if I have a translator that doesn't know how to clearly set out their experience, explain what they've been doing, I cannot expect them to do a good job as translators. So if I'm looking for linguists, obviously I'm looking for the grammatically, orthographically perfect resume or cover letter in general. I do expect that. And yes, their style of writing will be very helpful in understanding just how good they are when it comes to transcreating, for example. Are they able to creatively communicate something? And it doesn't have to be the type of resume that is kind of out of this world and tries to look like it's like a magazine article or anything of the sort. I'm fine with the standard formats, but that's part of it.
I love a resume that fits on one page, and I'm not talking about a really, really small font. So, give me really the highlights of what you've done. Describe what you're actually doing, what you're strong, what are your strengths? Are you really good at working with customers, for example? Are you really good at technical troubleshooting? And maybe some examples of things you did. What type of a team do you work in? Are you really good at working, collaborating in a team? Are you more of a, put your heads down and solve problems on my own? Those kind of things I think are valuable. So yeah, and really I think the more recent experience is just so much more important than stuff too far from the past. I'm not saying there's no importance to that, but the last 5 years are probably the most, because I assume the last 5 years you've been doing the things you want to be doing.
I think the first one would be relevant skills and experience. So they should be highlighted and placed on top of the list in the resume. And quantifiable achievements. So how you contribute to the success of the previous employee or to the school project you were part of, or what was your contributions as a volunteer. So these achievements should be very well written. And I think it should follow education and credentials, relevant degree or certifications, courses you have taken. So it clearly shows that how you learned on your own. And there are many localization courses and lessons that you can sign up for. So I think in that sense, we are lucky in this industry. And I would also look for professionalism. So you need to showcase your attention to detail. The CV, it should be well formatted, error-free, and tailored to the job that you're applying for.
So I'm also looking at how long a person stays with a different company. So if I see a few months here, a few months there, a few months here, big space, those are all flags to verify why that person is jumping from one company to another and only staying several months. That concerns me. Sometimes there's definitely good explanations, like company layoffs, which we're seeing right now, for example, and there could be some personal reasons for the gaps and so on. But that's another thing I look at. The experience I like to see is if you are applying for, let's say, an engineering position in localization, that you have spent time with a company in that role for several years, and that I see you consistently maybe holding that role or growing from within that particular discipline. So those are my good indicators and then for the engineering role in particular, I would like to see all the technical requirements to be there, right? Whether it's the knowledge of different computer assisting tooling or the knowledge of other platforms and tools we use in the industry. So that's important.
I mean, I can look at myself as an example. This is not a secret. It's on LinkedIn. I worked for Intel for 20 years, and then I worked for two different localization service providers for 3 years each, and still doing work for Intel. So I've been doing work for the same company essentially for 27 years. You could say, well, maybe a little more variety would have, changed who I am as well. So I think there's some switching can be a good thing too, because you see, especially when you see a person really having a trajectory of moving to different roles that are more difficult and more challenging. So you see that growth. And that's maybe a little harder to see from somebody who's been with the same company for a long time. However, again, in an interview, that's something I would want to address to see how did that person move through the company, or did they just kind of stagnate? They're just happy to do this one thing. And some people do, right? They like to do the same thing for a very long time. There's a benefit to that too. They might be really loyal and might stick around for a long time. So pros and cons.
My background is basically in quality management, so I may be a bit biased here, but I think I need a resume to look good and to be properly written. I think if you apply for a role within the localization industry where everything revolves around language, its quality, I would just suggest to put an extra effort into checking if your resume doesn't contain typos, if it has a consistent layout, and if it reads well. But apart from that, I think I also like to see that someone is genuinely interested in growing their professional skills. So I would recommend that you include any relevant courses, any relevant experience, or that you, for example, mention your participation in, let's say, a student conference or some kind of industry event. And I think, speaking of resumes in general, I think there are some universal things to keep in mind. So, for example, don't make it too long. Make sure to tailor it for the role that you are applying for. And I think if you are not sure about something, if it looks good, if it reads well, just make sure to consult it with a friend, your teacher or mentor, or someone you trust, and consult it. Don't assume that it's all right.
Also, awareness. And it's like business awareness. I want a translator that understands what is business like and what is not business like. I mean, it's fine if you want to tell me a little bit about your hobbies, but if you're going to fill half of your resume talking about hobbies and things that are not relevant to the job, how can I trust you to understand what is relevant to a translation, right? So in general, just those sort of business skills that you can perceive by looking and reading a resume, that'll help me get a sense of just how much you understand how to read your client, how to understand their needs, what their expectations are, right? Because as a translator, this is what you're doing all the time. They're not going to always give you a brief. You're not always going to have full clarity of what it is that they want. Kind of need to go out there and explore the brand, look at what they're doing, look at who you're, the person you're talking to, how do they behave? And that will help you understand what it is that is expected of you. If you give me a resume that shows that you have no understanding of what it is that we expect from you, then I cannot expect you to do that well as a translator.
I'm reviewing resumes all the time, even when we're not actively recruiting. Well, I'm looking for something special, which doesn't need to be completely funky, but within the experience and the skill that we're presented with, I'm looking for something that can be an asset for our current activities and for what we want to develop in the future. So, for instance, now I would very much like to develop our machine translation capabilities, be able to train and maintain engines. We don't have an opening for that officially, but if I hear something, I feel something, that I consider that, for instance. And I think that's, for a large part, the way we work, is that we're on the lookout. We're not looking for something specific, but always trying to connect some dots. So what can we use, and what we are going to look for in a CV, that would be those skills that stem from that experience that the candidate has, or from nothing, like some skills and a talent, if you don't really have any experience whatsoever.
So another thing is a little bit of pet peeve of mine is if people have this huge list of tools and technologies and file types they're working with that take up half the resume. And, they one time have worked with software tools. Don't list 10 different bug tracking tools or version control tools. Anybody can learn how to use those tools. It's not rocket science, so there's really no big benefit. Just list defect tracking, source control. It just lists various, to say I worked with various tools. I can find my way around in all of those instead of these long lists of tools that really doesn't add that much value.
Some people get really creative and get pictures in of themselves, and they have different colors and fonts. I would say basic is fine. If it speaks for itself. The addition, if you don't have the experience, or you don't have, many companies you have kind of gone through or experience, the colors are not going to make a difference. But what will make a difference, let's say you are just straight out of school, or you have gone through Andre's course. List the different types of courses you have taken. It doesn't need to be a school, it doesn't need to be Harvard and translation, But if you have taken these type of courses, something like MemSource phrase training, or if you have taken Excel advanced courses, or just list that in, and that's really almost as good as the experience, because then we can see, where the fit would be the best.
I am looking for a diversity of experience as well. Someone who is curious, who is interested in different things, can explore different subjects. I'm not necessarily interested in someone who has only done translation and has only done it in a single specific way, because the wonderful thing about translation is that, and localization, is that you can translate and localize for any type of company in the planet. So the more diverse your experience, the more likely it is that you're going to be able to easily adapt to any subject that I give you. For example, right now, the company I work for, Skillshare, we're translating all sorts of subjects all the time. You need to really quickly become an expert in watercolors, need to become an expert in Python or Ruby, just so that you can quickly check a class and see if the translation makes sense. You have to get acquainted with tools very quickly. So I am going to be looking for someone who can highlight that type of additional experience in a positive and business-like way.